Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates.
This guy is a hero.
Meet the hero, the lawyer who took on Dupont over the dangerous chemicals used to make Teflon, played by Mark Ruffalo in the new film Dark Waters.
Dupont is knowingly poisoning 70,000 local residents for the last 40 years.
Rob Bilot's work helped to expose how virtually every American already has those chemicals in their blood, and he's still on the case.
I first warned EPA 18 years ago, and we are still here. We have more than enough evidence. It's time to move forward and act to protect the American public.
Plus, fears about a new virus, highly contagious and deadly, and its potential to spread far beyond China. 17 dead already. Hundreds infected around the world, including one man in the U.S., in Washington state. Is the U.S. doing enough to protect its citizens? And our shout-out. Jay-Z is using his celebrity and his fortune to take on the state of Mississippi over the horrendous conditions in its state prisons. 9 prisoners dead so far in the first 3 weeks of the year.
Even top prison officials have admitted that the gangs are in charge of these prisons.
But long before Jay-Z got involved, it was this reporter who first broke the story of what is a national disgrace. From the Law and Crime Network studios in New York City's Herald Square, this is Brian Ross Investigates. Good evening and welcome. And we begin tonight with fears around the world about the spread of a highly contagious and potentially deadly virus that first showed up in China. There are already 17 confirmed deaths in that country, and there are reports of hundreds more infected around the world, including an American in Washington state who had just returned from China.
In Health Watch now, a deadly virus appears to be spreading quickly in China.
As China races to contain the mysterious illness that has killed at least 17 people.
The virus was first identified at a market in the city of Wuhan last month, which was selling seafood and live animals.
This is ground zero for the illness sparking global unease.
The virus has infected nearly 600 people in at least 6 countries, including the U.S.
A man in Washington state has the same virus that has sickened about 300 people in China.
100 experts from the CDC are descending on JFK, Los Angeles, and San Francisco airports this weekend. They are taking the temperatures of passengers arriving from Wuhan, China, hoping to prevent coronavirus.
The Spring Festival travel rush saw a mass migration of people, and that has objectively increased the risk of epidemics spreading and the difficulties in taking effective preventative and control measures. We should always be on high alert and never take this lightly.
Wuhan's 11 million people are being told they can't leave, a major step in the city's and country's fight against this virus.
And now, to get a better understanding about this potential threat, we're joined by Dr. William Schaffner, an expert on preventive medicine and infectious diseases at Vanderbilt University. Dr. Schaffner, thank you for being here tonight. Let me start by asking you, how serious is this threat, really?
Well, it's a threat. There's no doubt, Brian. But we're learning some things that are cautiously optimistic. One is, it's not as deadly as we anticipated. Apparently, many people get sick, but fortunately, very few in comparison die, not as serious as SARS. And the other is, as the information is coming in, perhaps this virus is not readily transmissible from person to person. So that gives us a better chance to get our arms around it and contain the outbreak.
And what is the source of this virus, Dr. Schaffner?
This is a coronavirus. It's a virus that has come from some animal species, still undetermined. It's jumped species to us. This happened with SARS. It came from civet cats and bats. MERS, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome virus, that came from camels. Bats were also involved. We don't know exactly which source gave us this virus yet. But once it's in us, the question is, can it go from person to person? And if so, how readily? We're getting more information, but it seems not to be very highly transmissible. Knock wood, I would say.
At this point, Dr. Schaffner, do you think the U.S. is doing enough to prevent it from spreading to this country?
I think we're doing a lot. The airport screening is a first line of defense. No line of defense is perfect, but that's an entirely good thing to do, and we've deployed many people. The information about this virus is getting out to all of us. Let me give you an example how this is brought down to home, right here in Nashville. In my own medical center, we have now added 2 questions to the routine that we will ask everyone who comes to our medical center, in the clinic, the emergency room, admitted to the hospital, who has fever and any symptoms that relate to the respiratory tract. It's low tech, no cost. We ask them, have you just returned from China, or have you had contact with someone returning from China? We're doing our own screening. We will identify those individuals, put them in isolation, deal with them with appropriate infection control precautions. We can give them wonderful care, and we can do it safely.
That's great. Dr. William Schaffner, thank you so much for being here tonight. We'll keep in touch with you.
Thank you.
Up next, meet the lawyer who took on the giant Dupont Company. His efforts now portrayed in the new film Dark Waters, played by actor Mark Ruffalo. Tonight you're going to meet a lawyer named Rob Bilott, who took on a giant corporation whose chemicals are now in the blood of virtually every American. It's a fight that is the subject of a new book that he has written and is portrayed by Hollywood in a new movie.
My name's Mark Ruffalo, and I'm honored to play the role of Rob Bilott in the upcoming film Dark Waters.
The film is the account of how a small-town lawyer, Rob Bilott, took on the huge Dupont chemical company.
Dupont is knowingly poisoning 70,000 local residents for the last 40 years.
Helping to expose how potentially dangerous chemicals used to make Teflon had made their way into the blood of almost every American.
What if whatever's killing those cows is in the drinking water?
Rob not only discovered that these toxic chemicals were building up in our blood, he also sounded the alarm, sharing what he found with the EPA. And also, Rob secured the funding through a legal settlement with DuPont to undertake the biggest human health study of toxic chemicals ever.
Bilott's crusade against DuPont got its first national attention in a report that Rhonda Schwartz and I filed for the ABC News program 2020. According to the federal government, some of the highest blood levels were found in a nationwide sample of children. And even DuPont says it cannot rule out that Teflon-connected products, such as its Stainmaster carpet treatment, give off the chemical, although at blood levels DuPont says are far too small to be a problem.
We are confident when we say that the facts, the scientific facts, demonstrate that the material is perfectly safe to use.
Uma Chowdhury, a vice president of research, is the DuPont executive chosen to publicly defend Teflon, the company's most valuable brand name. She says Teflon is completely safe, even if the key chemical is in everyone's blood. Everyone has it.
Everyone has it.
It's in my blood? Your blood?
Possibly. We do not believe there are any adverse health effects.
Is it a good thing to have it in your blood?
There are lots of chemicals that are present in our blood.
In America, it falls to us, the ordinary people, to prove that these chemicals are toxic before the chemical is regulated by our government. That is simply backwards. It's the companies that make billions of dollars producing these companies, not us.
The public may only now be realizing the scope of this problem, but the companies that manufactured these chemicals have been aware of the risks for decades, but failed to alert the rest of us. I know because I spent the last 20 years of my career in litigation with these companies, pulling out of their own internal files what was already there and was already known about the risks of these chemicals.
And we're now joined by Rob Bilott, the lawyer who Mark Ruffalo calls a hero, and the author of a new book chronicling his efforts, Exposure. Mr. Bilott, thank you so much for doing here. DuPont says of the new movie that features your efforts that it misrepresents and mischaracterizes executives and employees and actions associated with historic DuPont in decades past, saying it's entirely in the realm of make-believe. What do you say?
Well, I think that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to make sure that this book was available to the public, and for the movie Dark Waters, for people to see the actual events here of what really transpired, that this really happened. This happened in our country, in the United States, during modern times, during our lifetimes, where you've got contamination on a global scale, unprecedented, contamination of drinking water, soil, all over the country, all over the planet, and in virtually every living creature's blood, humans, polar bears, you name it. And so I wanted to make sure all of the history of what actually has happened, what we do actually know, what the facts actually are in the book, in Exposure. Everybody can go look and see for themselves where the truth actually lies here.
And Rob, we're also joined tonight by Bucky Bailey, whose mother worked at that Dupont plant in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and was born with severe birth defects. Bucky was also portrayed in the movie Dark Waters. So Bucky, thank you for being here. When we first met you for our report on 2020 years ago, you were just getting married and concerned that given the high levels of the chemical in your blood, any children you might have had would have suffered the same plight. So Bucky, bring us up to date.
Well, it took us several years to get to a point where we wanted to have children just due to the struggles that I faced in my life. Genetics told us that my children would have 50% chance of contracting the same birth deformities. So it took us quite a few years to get to a point where we did. Finally, through prayer and faith, we made the choice, and I now have two beautiful children, a 3-year-old son and a 10-month-old daughter, and they are the love of my life, and I'm supremely blessed.
That's great news. A question now from our control room and executive producer Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
So, Rob, you were able to get an astonishing DuPont settled with you for $650 million. You had 3,500 clients. But what about Bucky Bailey's birth defects? Were you able to get any compensation or connection, any satisfaction there?
Unfortunately, the scope of the study that was done, we set up this massive human health study to try to have independent scientists look at all of the data, including what was in DuPont's internal files, including their own study, which showed that 2 out of the 7 women at the DuPont plant had children with these defects, including, unfortunately, Bucky, as we all know. And the panel, we put together an independent panel to look at all that data, try to do a bigger study so that they could get enough cases and enough instances to be able to confirm which diseases were linked. They were able to link 6 different diseases, including 2 types of cancer. But unfortunately, there just weren't enough cases with the birth defects to confirm that link. And I think we're all hoping that with additional studies and hopefully with even bigger studies, possibly national studies, that will eventually be confirmed. And we'll know one way or the other, finally.
So, Rob Bilott, you're still fighting with DuPont.
Yes, we actually still have cases that are pending. As you heard, we had a settlement in 2017 for about 3,500 people who had one of the 6 diseases linked to drinking this chemical in their water. That was a settlement for about $671 million in 2017. Unfortunately, because of how many people have been exposed, we've got people who are being diagnosed with these diseases almost every day. So additional cases have been filed. Those cases are now pending, and DuPont is choosing to fight every one of those cases in court. We've also filed a new case where we are seeking to try to get independent scientists to look not just at PFOA, but at this wider group of PFAS chemicals that we now know are out there in our water, in our blood, and to independently confirm what this larger group of chemicals will do on a national scale. That's pending right now in federal court in Ohio.
And Bucky Bailey, let me ask you, you're still in the fight yourself. You're eager to make sure nobody suffers what you went through.
Absolutely. I'm honored to play my part in it and stand with Rob, stand with Mr. Ruffalo and others who are fighting. I've met numerous people who have been impacted by this and still continue to be impacted by this, and I will do my very best to shout it from the rooftops that we cannot move forward like this. We need change.
And that change is what, do you think?
Regulation. We need to have this chemical stop. We need to understand exactly the impact that it has, which we have that in our hands now. And now we are waiting for Congress, we're waiting for our government to enforce it. We know what the studies have shown. We know the harmful effects that it has on us. We can't continue to go about thinking that there's no effect.
And Rob Bilott, let me ask you, in Washington, you're not getting that great of a reception, are you, from this current administration?
Well, this has been a process now that's been going on for almost 20 years through multiple administrations. And, we're really hoping that people realize this is not a political issue. I mean, it shouldn't be a partisan issue. I mean, it shouldn't be red or blue, Democrat or Republican. We're talking about clean water, clean blood, and a clean environment, something I would hope all of us support. But moving this through the regulatory system, it's one of the things I try to explore in more detail in the book, Exposure. And you see that played out in painstaking, the long process in the movie Dark Waters as well. This takes a long time to move through this regulatory system in the United States. And in the meantime, at least, we've got states that are trying to move forward and fill that gap and protect people in the meantime. I'm really hoping that people see what people like Bucky Bailey and Mr. Tennant did, standing up, one person, can make a huge change by just standing up and saying we're not going to put up with this, and things need to be different.
Well, you both have made a huge change. Congratulations to you, Rob Bilott and Bucky Bailey. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and congratulations on the movie and your new book, Exposure.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Up next, our Shoutout. Music mogul Jay-Z is now going to bat for prisoners in Mississippi, but that's only after the groundbreaking work of a dedicated investigative journalist who first told the story. The plight of inmates held in inhumane conditions in the state of Mississippi prisons got a lot of attention this week when the rap music mogul Jay-Z went to bat for the prisoners, hoping to bring a lawsuit against that state's governor and the head of the state prison system. But our shout out tonight goes to Jerry Mitchell, the dedicated investigative reporter in Mississippi who, long before Jay-Z came along, first exposed those conditions. This video, obtained by the Marshall Project, shows what officials call a gang-ordered murder on an inmate, seen running from his attackers, trying to get away, trapped in a shower cell, stabbed 10 times, and left for dead. It's become a big issue in Mississippi.
This cell phone video surfaced last week, matching the details of an incident that ended Wednesday night with a guard hospitalized and part of the prison on fire.
Reporters at Investigate TV have uncovered alarming staff shortages at prisons across the country.
There is simply not enough manpower in place to keep tabs on the more than 3,000 inmates that are housed there.
But prison officials have acknowledged the problem.
When you don't have the appropriate level of staff, safety is a concern.
And joining us now via Skype from Mississippi is Jerry Mitchell, the investigative reporter who's been writing about prison conditions in his state there for years. And Jerry, it doesn't seem to be getting even any better after all those promises of reform. Why is that?
Well, for one, the staffing level is like half of what it should be. And then money-wise, the Department of Corrections in Mississippi has basically lost about $185 million. And that's money that went to prop up the state budget, go toward corporate tax cuts, those things. So prisons are hurting.
And you reported recently on the number of people who have been killed in the prison. What's the latest death toll there?
Well, there have been 8 deaths in Parchman Prison, the Mississippi State Penitentiary at Parchman, just since a few days before the new year. And so it's awful. It's just terrible. And, it's just kind of become a killing zone there. And, they don't have the staff to kind of keep security. And as we've talked about before, Brian, one of the big problems is gang control. And gangs are playing a huge role in this.
And why do the prison wardens allow that to be the case? Have they just lost control of these prisons?
Well, if you don't have the staff, you don't have control. You're essentially acquiescing and giving your control to the inmates. And then among inmates, of course, it's going to be who's most powerful. And unfortunately, that sometimes and often becomes gangs.
So you began reporting on this years ago. They promised to make reforms. They did make reforms, and now they're cutting the budget?
Yeah, they cut it like $185 million. I mean, they promised at the point they passed the reform, and Mississippi was held up as this great example, that they were going to save these millions of dollars by cutting the number of inmates and then put that money, those millions, back into inmate programs. And it just never happened, Brian. It never happened.
And who do you blame for that?
Well, state lawmakers, I mean, for starters, and certainly the leadership, all those things. The governor is in charge of the in charge of the prisons.
And in this case, the governor knows all this is going on. The reports almost every third day of another death in the prison, and yet they have not changed the policies.
Well, what he said was kind of said it wasn't my fault. Now he was lieutenant governor when all this went down, the funding part of it. But he's basically saying, I'm going to find someone really good to take over the prison system, but, be patient, give me time. Well, in the meantime, we've had all these deaths. They continue to happen.
That's amazing. And Jerry, you've got a new book coming out called Race Against Time.
Yes.
And that's about some cold cases, murder cases in Mississippi. Do you ever get cynical about all those things happening in your state? We've just got about 15 seconds here.
Yeah, it was about the Medgar Evers case, the Mississippi burning case, the Birmingham church bombing case, the reopening and re-prosecutions of those cases, which I wrote about.
Oh, boy. Well, Jerry Mitchell, thank you so much for being here tonight. Your work, this new book, and all-day reporting, it deserves the praises of getting from people around the country who do care about social justice, as do you. Thanks again, Jerry.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it very much.
Well, that's our program for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you back here next week.